Okay, welcome back. So let's start with dependence topic, the important topic. Okay, here dependence can be classified as qualifying child and qualifying relative. And parents will be part of relatives. Okay, and remember, spouse will never be your dependent. Okay, qualifying child and qualifying relatives are the two type of dependence. Say a child as a qualifying child, the child need to satisfy certain tests. Even when a relative want to convert to be a qualifying relative, they need to satisfy certain tests. And there are few tests which are common in both of the child and relatives. Common tests. Okay. Why dependents are important? Dependents will help you to claim certain credits, child tax rate, additional child tax credit, dependent care credit, dependent credit, etc. There are different credits which you will understand when we do the tax credits topic, where you can claim many credits because of having dependents. Even when you see head of household status, you see there should be a qualifying dependents who live for more than half of the year and on whom the taxpayer have a cost of more than incur a cost of more than 50% for the household expense. So all those are qualifying dependents. So dependents will help you to reduce your tax liability. So dependents are very important. Okay. So if you see the two categories exist, qualifying child and qualifying relative. Parents will be part of this qualifying relatives. And say that I said there are some common tests, dependence common tests. The first one is dependence test. A taxpayer who can be claimed as a dependent by another person cannot claim any dependent on their own tax return. Okay. In other words, if you qualify as someone as dependents, you cannot claim anyone else. So you yourself are the dependents in someone's return, and you cannot, when you as a dependent, when you are filing your return, say your thresholds are higher than the filing requirements, and you want to file a tax return, you cannot claim somebody as a dependent in your return because you yourself are a dependent on someone else's return, right? So that's the reason you cannot claim someone as a dependent in your return. Let us do one example. Emily, age 19, is a full-time college student. Her parents provide more than 50% of her support. Emily can be claimed as a dependent on her parents' return. So parents claimed Emily, parents in their return, they claimed Emily as a dependent. Okay. Now, Emily is supporting her brother as well. Okay. Now, Emily want to file her return. While Emily is filing her return, her brother cannot be claimed as a dependent in her return because she is claimed as a dependent in her parents' return. So her brother, she cannot claim her brother as a dependent in her return. Emily is a dependent. She cannot claim her younger brother Jack as a dependent on her own return, even if she contributes some support. Okay. This is the first test, dependence test. And the next test is joint return test. Dependent eligibility. Here, a dependent generally cannot file a joint return with their spouse if they are to be claimed as by another taxpayer. Say, me and my spouse are married filing joint and claiming my son as a dependent in my return. Okay. Now my son is married to Mrs. X. Say, now my son should not file joint return with Mrs. X. My son and X should not file a joint return. Okay. The dependent generally cannot file a joint return with their spouse if they are claimed by another taxpayer. See here, we are claiming our son, as a dependent in our tax return. So to claim such person as a dependent, such person should not file any joint return with their spouse. Now my son should not file any joint return with X. If he files, I cannot claim my son as a dependent in my return. Okay, there is one small exception for this. If the dependent and their spouse file a joint return only to claim a refund of withheld taxes or estimated taxes, the dependent may still qualify. See here, they can file a joint return in one exceptional case. Only that cases, only for getting the refund. If they file this joint return, then that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, they cannot file any joint return. To claim, see here, if the dependents and their spouse file a joint return, only to claim a refund of tax withheld or estimated taxes. Okay, say now my son has some withheld taxes and my say X also have some taxes to be refunded. Only then both of them should file a joint return and get back their amount as refund. In such cases, I can still claim my son as a dependent in my joint return that I am filing with my spouse. Okay. A married child files jointly but has no tax liability and only seeks a refund. The child can still be claimed as a dependent. There should not be any tax liability in the joint returns that are being filed by my son. Okay, both of the persons should not have, my son and X should not have any tax liability. That should be purely a refund case. Okay, both are filing jointly because both of them want to get their refunds. Okay. Okay. Only in such case they can go and file the joint return. Otherwise, if any dependent files a joint return, I cannot claim such person as a dependent in my return. Okay, I hope you are clear. The next one is citizenship test. A dependent must generally be a US citizen, US resident alien, or a resident of Canada or Mexico. The dependent, say the child or relative, should be the US citizen or residents of US, Canada, and Mexico. Or Mexico. Any of these three places they should be resident. Only such person can be claimed as a qualifying dependent. Because these are common tests which apply to all, either child or relative. The first one is dependence test, second is joint return test, third is a citizenship test. Okay, hope everyone are clear. So there is one small exception for this citizenship test, that is foreign born adopted children. Say if someone child born in foreign and this US people want to adopt such foreign child, then a legally adopted child who is not a US citizen, resident or US national can still meet this test if the child lives with the taxpayer all year as a household member. So generally a foreign child, they are not US citizens, they are not US residents. Okay, and they are not even US nationals, they're totally outside US, they're not satisfying the citizenship test, right? They're not from any of these things, say Canada, Mexico, US citizens or residents of US. Such foreign child such foreign child, we still say they satisfy the citizenship test provided that child live with the taxpayer all year. Child should live with the taxpayer one full year as a household member. Then even though the foreign child who do not satisfy the citizenship test, still we can claim that foreign child as a dependent provided the other tests are satisfied. Okay, this is about citizenship test. I hope everyone are clear till now. The common tests. Okay, three common tests which apply for both qualifying child and qualifying relative. And one more, like there are few other tests for qualifying child, specifically for qualifying child. Even for qualifying relative, there are specific tests which they need to satisfy. Now we'll see what are all the tests that apply to qualifying child. See, along with these three tests, child should also satisfy the test which I am about to discuss now. Then we can say that child is converted from child to a qualifying child. Such qualifying child can be claimed as a dependent. Okay. The first one is relationship test. Child, stepchild, siblings, step siblings, descendants, adopted child, foster child. Every child, all these childs will be considered as like they should have this relationship. Say either child relationship or stepchild relationship, siblings, brothers, and step siblings, and adopted children, foster children, everyone. All this is the relation we need to have, relationship test. But in qualifying surviving spouse, own, step, adopted, only these three. But here it is even more wider. For qualifying surviving spouse, I said there should be a qualifying child living with the surviving wife or spouse. That qualifying child should be only three categories, that is own, step, and adopted. Okay, even if the foster child is living with the wife, for in our example we discussed, right? If the foster child is living with the child, a wife, for those 2 years after the death of the husband, we cannot claim, we cannot go for qualifying surviving spouse because it's a foster child. It should be own, step, or adopted. Okay, in case of qualifying surviving spouse. But to say a child is a qualifying child, this relationship test includes other children, other category also, like siblings, step siblings, and the descendants. Descendants in the sense grandchildren, grandchild, and adopted child and foster child. There are this category is wider when compared to qualifying surviving spouse. Simply to say, you cannot show your grandchildren, you cannot show your grandchildren as a child living with you for entire year and claim a qualifying surviving spouse status. But you can show your own step and adopted child as a person, as a child living with you for entire year and claim qualifying surviving spouse. I think you got my point. Okay? Even though they are qualifying childs, even though the grandchild is a qualifying child, say the grandchild satisfied all the tests, all the common tests that we discussed, and the test that we discussed now, that we are about to discuss now, even though the grandchild is a qualifying child, but your grandchild will not qualify you for qualifying surviving spouse status. Only 3 children own, step, and adopted. Only these 3 categories of qualifying children will qualify you for qualifying surviving spouse status. I hope you are clear with this point. Okay, done with the first test, relationship test. And the next one is residency test. Lived with taxpayer for more than 6 months, that is more than 50%. Living test, residency test, that the child, all these children or any of these children should live with the taxpayer for more than 50%, more than 6 months. And temporary absences allowed. Okay, what is temporary absences? Say the child is away from home due to school or vacation or due to some medical reasons or some military reasons, etc. Even though they are staying away, those days will be counted while counting this 6 months. Till they are included. Okay. So the first test is which specifically applies to child relationship test. The next test is residency test. There is an exception to the residency test about that is child of divorced or separated parents. Divorced or separated parents. So what happens here? We said the child should live with the taxpayer for more than 6 months. Say in case of divorced parents, here in this case, genuine say the parents are living together, both will file one joint return and both the parents will be at one place and child will be with the parent. And the 6 months condition is very easy to count. But in case of divorced parent, one parent will be some place and other parent will be another home, as they are divorced. They are not living together anymore. Now, who will claim the child? Who will claim the child? That's the exception. When parents are divorced, legally separated, or never married and do not live together, see that in US this culture is very common. Okay, so they're never married but they have a child and they're not living together. Say special rules determine who can claim the child. There are certain rules. Now in this situation, who can claim the child? In both of the parents, who can claim the child? The first rule is the first right goes to the custodial parent. Custodial parent has the first right to claim the child as a dependent in his or her return. Who is a custodial parent? The parent with whom the child lived the greater number of nights. Greater number of nights. Say with father the child lived for 1 to 10 nights, and with mother the child lived for 220 nights. So the mother will be the custodian parent. First custodial parent will have the right to claim. If the child lived equally with both the parents, say here I said with a larger number of days with whom they stay, with whom the child stayed, that person will be the custodial parent and that custodial parent can claim. What if the child lived equally with both the parents, equal number of days with both the parents? In that case, the tiebreaker rules apply and the parent having the higher AGI is considered as a custodial parent. First preference goes to custodial parent with whom the child lived more number of days, more number of nights. Now, if the child lived with both the parents equally, then the person having the higher AJ will be considered as custodial parent and that parent can claim the child as a dependent in their return. Okay. There is one more exception to this rule, exception to exception, that is non-custodial parent can claim. Generally, I said the custodial parent will claim, and if both the parents, if the child is living with both the parents, persons with higher age is considered as a custodial parent. Now, what about non-custodial parent? Yes, a non-custodial parent may claim the child if all the following conditions are met. That is, parents are divorced, legally separated, or lived apart for the last 6 months of the year. Any of these things might happen. And the child received more than 50% of support from both the parents combined. Yeah, both the parents together contributed more than 50% of support to the child. And the child is the custody of one or both the parents for more than half of the year. Okay. Okay. The child is in the custody of one of the parent or both the parents for more than half of the year. If all these conditions are satisfied, and one important condition, this is general conditions. These are all general conditions. For you to be in situation, all these things are common, general. But this is important. The custodial parent signs Form 8332 releasing the exemption which must be attached to non-custodial parent's tax return. The custodial parent should say that I will not claim the child as a dependent in my return and send the Form 8332 that will be attached with non-custodial parent's tax return, and non-custodial parents can claim this child as a dependent. This is important. All these first 3 points are common. The new point is the custodial parent should sign Form 8332 releasing the exemption which must be attached to non-custodial parent's tax return. So the custodial parent says, I don't want to claim this child as a dependent in my return. You can go ahead and claim this child as a dependent. Okay. Only the custodial parent can claim head of household status and earned income tax rate even though the non-custodial parent claims the child. This is for, say, this state, whatever this 8332 is there, for non-custodial parent can go and claim the child as a dependent in his return. That's all. But using this child, non-custodial parent cannot qualify his status as head of household. Only custodial parent can claim head of household status and earned income tax credit as well, even if the non-custodial parent claims the child. Even the non-custodial parent has a child, but a custodial parent can qualify for head of household status. Okay, by showing this child as a dependent in the return of the non-custodial parent, the non-custodial parent cannot go and file the head of household status. Okay, he cannot be eligible for earned income tax credit by showing this child in the return through this form 8332 because he is a non-custodial parent at the end. Okay, so this is one test, and the next test is age test. Age test, under 19, the child should be under 19, or if it's a full-time student, the child should be under 24 years, or any age if disabled. If they are disabled, there is no age limit. Otherwise, if they should be under 19 years, and if they are a full-time student, they should be under 24 years. And support test, child should not provide more than 50% of own support. In other sense, the taxpayer should provide more than 50% support to the child. Child should not contribute his or her support for more than 50%. Okay. So these are all the different tests the child should qualify. So these are common tests, and specific tests which are applied are from here: relationship test, residency test, and age test, support test. Okay. These are the tests that apply for the child. Apart from these common tests, dependency test, joint written test, and citizenship test, apart from these common tests, the child should also satisfy these tests. Okay, that is about qualifying child. And the next one is qualifying relative test. Okay, the first one is not a qualifying child. That person should not be a qualifying child because they are a qualifying child that goes to that child should satisfy all these tests, not a relative part. Okay, a child who qualifies as a dependent on the qualifying child rules for one taxpayer cannot be claimed as a qualifying relative by another taxpayer. Say for me, I claimed my son as a qualifying child in my return. Some other person cannot claim my son as a qualifying relative because I claimed my son as a qualifying child in my return. So a single, and one more thing, a single dependent cannot be claimed as a dependent in more than one taxpayer's return. Say if I'm a dependent in X taxpayer's return, no other person can claim me as a dependent. So a dependent can be a dependent in only one single taxpayer's return. This is one more thing. Okay. So here a child who qualifies as a dependent under the qualifying child rules for one taxpayer, say for one taxpayer, this X person is a dependent as is a qualifying child. For other taxpayer, this child cannot be a qualifying relative because the child is already claimed as a dependent on somebody else's return. Okay, that's the important thing. The child can be, one more exception is the child can be claimed as a dependent under the qualifying relative rules. The child parents is not required to file a tax return and either does not file or files one only to receive a refund or tax withheld. This is a small minor exception. Here, the parents say some X person is my say my son. I am claiming my son as a qualifying child, but he's a qualifying child for me. But the child satisfied all the tests. As a parent, he's a qualifying child for me. I can claim him as a dependent. But here I did not file a return. I did not file a return or only filed to claim the refunds. I only filed the return to claim the refund. In that case, my child can be claimed by other person as a qualifying relative. That's absolutely fine. General rule, when somebody child is claimed as a dependent in someone's return, the other person cannot claim the same child as a qualifying relative. But here there's an exception where if the child's parent is not required to file a return or file return only for the purpose of return, an other person can claim this child, even though that's a qualifying child for somebody, still that's okay. This child can be claimed as a relative on somebody, that person's return. Okay, that's a small exception. Okay. The next one is relationship or live test. Very important. Lives with the taxpayer all year. It's a or condition. Either they should be a relative or they should live with the taxpayer. Relationship or live test. It's or condition, not end condition. Either they should be a relative to us, to the taxpayer, or that person should live with the taxpayer for full year. Full year. Important. Or condition. Important. First, I will say they should be relative. Who are all the relatives? Say child, stepchild, foster child, grandchild, siblings, niece, nephew, son-in-law, half siblings, daughter-in-law, father-in-law. All these are relations. Parents, step-parents, grandparents, foster parents, cousins, unrelated dependents. Oh, okay. Foster parents, cousins, unrelated dependents are excluded. Wait. From here, all these are relations. All these are relations. Child, sibling, parents. The first three are all relations. These people, that's okay. They satisfied this relationship test because they are relatives to us in terms of these relations, child, sibling, parents, step parents, etc. Even though they did not live with the taxpayer, even though they did not live with the taxpayer, that's absolutely fine. They satisfied this relationship test. And when they satisfy other tests, they'll be qualifying relative. Even though they did not live. Okay. But foster parents, cousins, unrelated dependents, they are excluded from the relatives. They are not relatives. They are not at all relatives. They will satisfy this relationship test only if they live with the taxpayer for one full year. Lives with the taxpayer for full year. Cousins, foster parents, and any person who is not a relative, if lived with the taxpayer for entire year, we say they satisfied this test. I hope you are clear. Again, I'll tell you this point and I'll connect this with the head of household status. Okay. The relationship test or live test. This is a or condition. First thing. They should be either relatives to us, okay, or they should live with the taxpayer for all year. Who are all the relatives here? Oh, stepchild, child, foster child, grandchildren, siblings, nephew, niece, son-in-law, mother-in-law, parents, step-parents, grandparents. These are all the relations. So as they are relatives, they satisfied this test without any other things. They satisfied the relationship test. And if they satisfy other tests, say not a qualifying child and gross income test, support test, which I'll discuss now, if they satisfy all these other tests, we can say that relative is a qualifying relative. But foster parents, cousins, unrelated dependents are excluded from the relative list. These persons will qualify this test only if they live with the taxpayer for full year. These relatives don't need to live. Even if they don't live, that's okay because they are relatives, they satisfy this relationship test. But these three persons are excluded from the relative list and they will satisfy this relationship test or live test only if they live with the taxpayer for one full year. Okay, now let's connect this with head of household. I go to head of household here. What did I say? Cousins, foster parents, and unrelated dependents cannot promote head of household even if they live with the taxpayer all year. Here you guess, I guess you understood this point. Here, these three are excluded from relatives list even in the relationship test. And I said these persons will satisfy the relationship or live test only if they live with the taxpayer one full year. Yeah, say my cousin lived with me for entire year. He's not a relative, but he lived with me for one full year, and that cousin satisfied other tests also, other tests, support test, etc., and gross income test, etc. My cousin satisfied all other tests, and now my cousin is a qualifying relative. Is a qualifying relative, but showing my cousin as a qualifying relative in my 1040, I cannot claim head of household status. I accept as my cousin lived with me for one full year and satisfied other tests required for a qualifying relative. He is a qualifying relative. But showing my cousin, who is a qualifying relative, as a dependent in my 1040, I cannot claim head of household status. Okay, hope you are clear with this point now. This means that even if they live with the taxpayer all the year, even that relationship test is satisfied, and even though they are a qualifying relative, head of household specifically says these three persons cannot qualify you for head of household status. Okay, one more point. You might get the doubt here when the relatives child, stepchild, foster child are here. What about this qualifying child then? That's the doubt you might have got now. See, a child who satisfied this test, qualifying child test, who claim them as a qualifying child. Say because of any reason you cannot claim your child as a qualifying child. Say because age test has been failed. Say more than required age, 20 years. Then you cannot. The age test is filed for child. That child will come and sit in the qualifying relative topic. Okay, as child test is failed, then check that particular child whether they satisfy the relationship test or not. If they satisfy the relationship test, then claim that child as a qualifying relative. Say my son is 20 years. My son failed this age test. Then I can go claim that child as a qualifying relative in my return, provided he satisfied the other tests of qualifying relative. Hope you are clear with this point. Moving ahead, the next point is gross income test. Dependents gross income should be less than 5050, that is for 2024, and this changes every year. Inflation adjusted number, don't need to remember this number. Dependents gross income is less than 5050. But this gross income includes all incomes received as a money, property, or services, whatever. Fair market value of the properties received, fair market value of the services received, or any money received, any cash received. All this will be part of the gross income that is not exempted from tax. There should be no exempted income. The social security benefit is one of the exempted incomes, you will understand that till certain portion the social security benefits are exempted. That should not be part of gross income. They should not be exempted from tax. The income should not be exempted from tax. Such incomes, if you add up all together, and that should be less than 5050 $5050. Rajesh supports his uncle with 60% of cost. Uncle earns $3,000, but Rajesh can claim him as a qualifying relative. Okay. Support test, the taxpayer provides more than 50% of. This is common. The taxpayer should provide more than 50% of support for his relative. Should take care of this relative by incurring costs of more than 50%. The support test, gross income test, relationship or live test are not a qualifying child test. All these tests should be satisfied. Okay, and there is one exception. With this, this is the last exception, and with this we'll be done with the dependence main topic. Okay, so for this support test, there is an if relative satisfies those common tests and these tests which we discussed till now, then we can say that that relative is a qualifying relative and we can claim as a dependent. See now, if I go back to this, I said cousins, foster parents, unrelated dependents like friends, etc. We cannot claim them as a head of household status, right? Even though they are qualifying relatives because they live with the taxpayer for one entire year, the relationship test satisfied, the relationship or live test satisfied, and provided say the gross income is also within the limit and taxpayer taken care of, the support, etc. All the things are satisfied, all the tests are satisfied. Now my cousin is a qualifying relative, and by showing this qualifying relative in return, I cannot go for head of household, but I will get some dependent credits. There is some concept called dependent credits of $500. We can get that credit. That's the reason you show your cousin name as a dependent in your 1040 and claim the dependent credits. But they'll not qualify you for head of household status. I think you're clear with that point. So now coming to exception of support test. Exception is multiple support agreements. I said taxpayer should take care of the relatives by providing more than 50% of the support, right? Say a mother has three sons, son 1, son 2, son 3. All of the three are providing support, but no one is providing more than 50% of support. Everyone are providing less than 50% of support. But together when we combine, all are providing more than, together if you see, it's more than 50%. Individually, if you see, the support coming from each son is less than 50%. But if you combine together, that is more than 50%. Then who should claim the mother as dependent? Who should claim this mother as dependent? Son 1, son 2, or son 3? That's an exception. That's a multiple support agreement allows one taxpayer to claim as a dependent when two or more people collectively provide more than half of the dependent support, but no single person contributes more than 50% individually. Individually, no person is providing more than 50%, but combinedly, if we check, they are providing more than 50%. Then who should take the mother as dependence in their return? That is about multiple support agreement. Out of these three, only one person should take. Who that person is, you'll understand. Purpose commonly used when siblings or adult children jointly support a parent or relative. Ensures tax benefits can be claimed even if no single contributor provides a majority of the support. This common thing which we discussed now. Purpose. Requirement. Group support. The combined contribution of all the parent participating individuals must exceed 50%. First thing, if you add up all the support provided by all the sons, that should be more than 50%. Individually, that should be less than 50%. And the taxpayer claiming the dependent must provide more than 10% of support. Minimum support should be more than 10%. Say, let's the competition start here. Son 1, son 2, son 3. Together, nobody provided more than 50%. Individually, he provided 20%. He provided 35%. He provided 35%. This person provided some 9%. See, if you add up all this, more than 50%, right? But individually, nobody provided more than 50%, and also minimum support should be 10%. As son 3 provided 9%, he's out of the game. Now the competition is in between S1 and S2, son 1 and son 2. Who should claim? So for him to participate, for a taxpayer to participate in this minimum support agreement, they should minimum provide 10%. Okay, minimum provide 10%. Here, son 3 will be out of the competition because he provided only 9%, which is less than 10%. Other contributors must consent in writing Form 2120 to let the taxpayer claim the dependent. Only person providing more than 10% of support should sign this Form 2120. Now, among these two, they should sign Form 2120. Say son 1 is signing 2120 and allowing son 2 to claim mother as dependent. Son 1 should sign 2120. both son 1 and son 2 should sign 2120, where they agree that son 2 will claim the mother as a dependent and I as a son 1 will not claim my mother as a dependent. Okay, I hope you are clear. And this 2120 signing will be only for the persons providing minimum 10% support. Son 3 should not sign this 2120. There is no need because he's out of the game already. Okay, the competition is in between S1 and S2. Only those persons should be part of that agreement. Sign that form 2120. Filing form 2120, multiple support declaration to report the agreement. Only one taxpayer can claim the dependent per year, but claims may rotate among eligible family members in different. This year, son 1 claimed, and next year, son 2 can claim. Maybe if son 3 provided more than 10% support in the next year, even son 3 can also claim. Okay. Example: 3 siblings, Neha, Raj, and Riya, supported their mothers who live in their own apartment. Total support is 8 lakhs, 44 coming from Neha, 49, and 7. Okay. No sibling provided more than 50% individually, but if we combine, it's more than 50%, that is 100%. Mother has no taxable income, so she satisfied the gross income test and she's also a US citizen. She satisfied the citizenship test. Who can claim the mother as a dependent? Neha or Raj can claim because they contributed more than 10%. Riya contributed only 7%, so she's out of the game. She's out of the game. And only these two should sign form 2120 and agree one among them will go and claim. Okay. See, if Neha wants to claim, Raj, who contributed more than 10%, must sign 2120 agreeing he will not claim his mother. And Neha meets all other requirements, relationship, gross, etc., and can claim the mother as a qualifying relative. When other tests are satisfied, Neha can claim the mother as a qualifying relative. Riya does not qualify and she don't need to sign 2120 also, as her contribution is less than 10. Okay, this is the exception of support test. Everyone are clear? Okay, all these are the different tests. Say if these relatives or child satisfy these common tests and specific tests apply to them, then we can say they are qualifying child and qualifying relative, and we can claim them in our return as a dependent, and we can get credits and head of household status and qualifying surviving spouse status. Okay, some key notes, some important notes. If you observe here, income test does not apply to child. The gross income test, if you see, that is only for relative. It means irrespective of the income earned by child, if other tests are satisfied, we can consider child as a qualifying child. Say, my son is earning more than this 5050 limit. That's okay. Without any income limit, we can claim my child as a dependent. I can claim my child as a dependent in my return. So income test does not apply to child. And age test does not apply to relatives. Relatives will not have any age test. And single person can only be claimed as a dependent by one taxpayer in a given tax year. Say if one person, I as a dependent claimed, someone claimed me as a dependent in his tax return, that's all. No other can claim me as a dependent in their returns. Okay. The key notes, important notes. IRS does not allow multiple taxpayers to claim the same dependence on their return. A small explanation to this. That's all. Okay. And for this there is a tiebreaker rule. If more than one person attempts to claim the same dependent, the IRS tiebreaker rule applies. Say X person is a dependent and I am his parent and some Y is a relative. Now he will be a qualifying dependent for both of us. He is eligible, that particular X, the son, is eligible person to claim as a dependent to both of us, me and Y. We can claim he's qualified now. We performed all the tests and we checked and he's qualified now. Now who should claim? Me or the relative? Now then the tiebreaker rule comes. The first preference is, the first check will be parent versus non-parent, and parent has priority. Now I as a parent will have the priority over the relative and I will claim my son as a dependent in my return. If the competition is not between parent and non-parent, then check the residency, the person with whom the dependent lived longer during the year. Okay, say suppose I'm not a parent, I am also a relative. The competition is in between two relatives. Y is a relative to the text person. I am also a relative to the text person. Okay, to whom to claim this X as a dependent in our returns, we need to check the person with whom the dependent lived for more number of days. Even that is failed, he lived to equally with both of them, then who can claim? The person with the higher AGI can claim. If still tied, the taxpayer with the higher AGI claims the dependent. First preference is check if there are any parents in these two competitors. If parent is there, parent will get the chance. If there is no parent, both are non-parents, check with whom the dependent lived for more number of days. The dependent lived equally, then go for the person having higher AGI. Okay, hope everyone are clear. Uncle and his Tom and his uncle both try to claim Tom's younger brother Jack as a dependent. Jack lived with his parents, Tom's parents, most of the year. Parents get priority over the uncle. Okay, so that's the simple example here. Hope everyone is clear. Okay, so let's go to the next concept: special dependency rules and exceptions. Okay, and filing requirements. The kidnapped child treated as live with the taxpayer until the child is returned, or maybe unfortunately due to kidnap he lost his life. Child lost his life on the or the year of death. Okay, treated as living with the taxpayer until the child is returned. That's okay. The days will be counted. The living test will be satisfied. The number of days live will be satisfied. Married filing separate. Many credits disallowed. This thing you know. $5 is the limit. And then born and died child in the same year. A child born and immediately due to some circumstances died in the same year. Then we don't need to apply SSN. SSN is not mandatory. We can mention it as died. The child died. Attach a birth certificate along with the written. Claim that child as a dependent. In SSN column you can mention as died. Getting SSN is not mandatory. NRA spouse may elect married filing joint, otherwise claim head of household if eligible. Okay. Due diligence. See, this NRA spouse now, like may elect married filing joint, you know this election, may doing this election, converting this non-resident spouse to resident and then file married filing joint. We know this. We know a resident and non-resident cannot file a joint return. For that, I am converting my non-resident spouse to resident using the spousal election and file a joint return. Or if this is not possible, say my NRA spouse said, no, I don't want to convert to a resident because my worldwide income will be taxed. I don't want it to be taxed if I go to that election. I don't want that tax, so I want to be a non-resident. So now this person cannot file married filing joint, and they can go for head of household status if he is taking care of any dependents and is satisfying the test of head of household. He can go for head of household status, or else single, or else go for single filing status. Okay. Okay, the next is due diligence. Preparer must document dependency claims for credits. One more thing is, we as a preparer need to file due diligence checklist. Okay, due diligence checklist. Say when we are finalizing on this head of household status, because we as a preparer we are assessing all this tests and we are finalizing this person is eligible for this taxpayer is eligible for head of household status. So we as a preparer assessing that head of household status, and then we are checking the credits. There are some credits called refundable credits, which you'll understand when we do credits topic. Say earned income credit, additional child tax credit, American opportunity credit. These are refundable credits. Say when such credits are assessed and claimed in the tax return, head of household status is assessed and claimed in the tax return, then preparer should be cautious. He should fill the due diligence checklist. Okay, there's a checklist called due diligence checklist. You need to opt all this checklist, say this and this is the reason. He'll opt and then that's the reason he finalized the status head of household or claimed the refundable credits. And he need to fill this due diligence checklist. If something goes wrong, he will have penalties. Taxpayer have penalties. Even though that person is not eligible for head of household, you as a preparer still show that this person is a head of household person. Then there will be some penalties. We'll clearly learn in part 3. Okay, so preparer should be very cautious while finalizing on this head of household status or claiming the refundable credits in the taxpayer's return. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, preparer will have the penalties. Okay, the next one is credits affected by dependency and filing status. Okay, child tax credit is 2000 per child and SSN required before return due date. See, all these are credits. If you have a dependent, say in our example, we discussed few things. Now, even though they are in case of head of household, if you see, two persons are excluded, but still we can claim them as a dependent. They're qualifying. Say my cousin is a qualifying relative. He satisfied all the tests. He lived with me for 1 full year, and support test is satisfied. Gross income test is satisfied. Citizenship test is satisfied. All tests are satisfied. My cousin is a qualifying relative, but I can show my cousin as a dependent in my tax return. But because of this cousin, you cannot go file a head of household status, file some other relevant status that relates to you, and then with using this cousin, you can go claim some dependence credits, $500. What is this dependent credit? You will understand when we do tax flip. That amount of $500 you can claim, you can reduce your tax liability. Okay, and these dependents will also affect our other refundable portion, the refundable credits, American Opportunity Child Tax and additional child tax credit, premium tax. There are certain credits which will be affected because of these dependents. Only if you have certain qualifying dependents, you will get those credits. Okay? So all these dependents are very important, and filing status is also important. Okay, please go through this. It's very important. Okay. So we are done. We are done with the dependence topic. Filing status topic is done. Dependence topic is done. Okay. 2 small concepts pending. We'll do that and we'll wrap up the session. We'll take a few MCQs and we'll wrap up the session. Okay. Injured spouse relief and innocent spouse relief. This is because I said married filing joint status. Both will file one single return, right? And the liability will be joint. Say if married filing joint has a tax due, both wife and husband are jointly responsible for that liability, right? For married filing joint. But there are certain exceptions to that. Say the first one is injured spouse relief. Injured spouse relief protect a taxpayer's share of joint refund from being applied to their tax spouse past due obligation. Say, wife has a refund, husband has a payable. And they file a joint return. Say it's 10 payable, her refund is 5. Now the net payable will be 5 because this refund is utilized again as the husband's payment. The net payable will be 5. So now if wife would have filed individually, she would have received this refund of 5. But she filed jointly with her husband, so that is set off utilized with the dues of the husband. Okay, in this case, this wife has an option to go for injured spouse relief. Here, this applies only to joint return. The conditions are you need to file a joint return for you to go and claim this injured spouse. Protects the innocent spouse portion of refund when it would otherwise be used to pay the other spouse debt. This is the main intention. This refund will be protected. By going for this injured spouse option, wife will get her share of refund to her. And husband should pay that amount. In this case, if she go for this injured spouse relief, the wife will get this refund that is previously used to set off the husband's liability. She will get that refund and husband will pay that amount. Okay, must file form 8379 injured spouse allocation either with the joint return or after filing. So you can attach this form 8379 along with the joint return. Say this is my refund portion. I want a injured spouse relief. I don't want my refund to set off with my husband's refund because of this married filing joint concept. I'm injured. I want my refund. This you can attach along with the joint return you are filing, or after filing you can send this form. And IRS will not easily do that. He do some assessments and then finalize whether you are eligible for injured spouse relief or not. The due date for filing 8379 is if you are sending along with the joint return due date as we discussed April 15. Okay, if filed after the return, if you did not file it with the return, then you need to file this form within 3 years from the original due date or 2 years from the date the IRS applied the refund to the spouse date, whichever is later. Okay, 3 years from the original return, or 2 years from the day IRS applied the refund to the spouse date, nothing but the day on which you made the payment. Okay, whichever is later. That is the day you need to file this form. Taxpayer is not legally responsible to pay the debt. Here in this case, wife should not be, the wife who is claiming in our example should not be legally responsible to pay the debt. That amount is what she need to claim as a refund. She is not legally responsible for any debt to pay that debt that husband. Because that is husband's payable, the amount belongs to husband and husband should pay and not she, and she want to protect her share of refund. And taxpayer's refund was or will be used to pay other spouse tax obligation. Okay. So see this thing should happen. This set off should happen. Okay, refund was or will be used to pay the other spouse tax obligation. So my $5 refund is being utilized with the $10 payable of the husband. That should be the case, and I am not responsible. I am not legally obligated to pay that $5. Take the $5 that is setting off with the refund. I am eligible for refund, so I don't want this set off to happen. I want my $5 refund back. The small concept on injured spouse. Alice and Bob filed jointly. Bob owns back taxes, some taxes. Alice income contributed 2,000 to withholding, but the IRS applies the full joint refund to Bob's debt. Alice can file this 8379 to recover her 2,000 portion. Okay, so this is a small example. Okay, I hope everyone is clear with this. Okay, the next one is innocent spouse relief. Here, the innocent spouse relief allows a spouse to avoid liability for tax, interest, and penalties if the joint return understates the tax due to the other spouse error or omission. Say there is a husband, the wife. Husband wantedly underreported some income. Wife is not aware of that. She's totally blank. She don't know that something like this happened. Later, IRS came to her husband and asked to pay taxes on this amount, interest on this amount, penalty on this amount. And they filed married filing joint during that year in which husband underreported the income. And wife is not aware of all this. She's totally innocent. Now, wife has an option to go for this innocent spouse relief and say that I'm totally innocent and I'm not aware of this, not responsible for this liability and interest. So I want a relief. Okay, the requesting spouse must show that she did not know and had no reason to know that about this understatement of tax. I have no knowledge of this thing, not aware of this. This is what the wife should prove. The other spouse should prove who's innocent. If even the spouse has share in that, this relief will not be there. Totally, she or he should be innocent to go for this relief. The taxpayer is divorced or no longer live together. They should be divorced at that time, or they no longer live together at that time. Okay, for this relief to apply. Applies even if IRS has already assessed the. Okay, even if the assessment is done, there is some timeline for assessment. You will understand when we do part 3. Even if that is done, assessment is also done, still you can go and file this relief. Must file form 8857 request for innocent spouse relief. Covers tax penalties and interest attributable to the other spouse errors. That's because of that's for husband's error and I'm not aware and I'm not responsible for paying this tax penalties and interest. Okay, one small example you can go through. Otherwise, I'll read. Carol and Dan files jointly. Dan fails to report 10,000 of income. Carol has no knowledge of this income. Carol can request the innocent spouse relief to avoid the paying the additional taxes. Okay. On small note, injured spouse relief protects refund from being taken for other spouse debt. Innocent spouse relief protects liability for understated taxes due to other spouse error. Okay. This is the difference between injured spouse and innocent. Okay, with this we are done. We are done with the today's topic. We have discussed about the dependents, discussed about this innocent spouse, injured spouse, etc. We discussed about lot of tests. I know there is lot, but that's okay. Just give a reading after this class. Give a small reading once. You'll definitely understand. If you have any queries, please reach out to me. Okay. So there are some exam focus points. Okay, we do some MCQs here, we do, and we'll wrap up the session. Okay. So which of the following taxpayer qualifies to head of household status? Married taxpayer living with spouse all year with no dependents. No dependents. Unmarried taxpayer paying more than 50% of the household cost for a qualifying child. Single taxpayer pays less than 50% of household cost for a parent. Divorced taxpayer with no children or dependents. Option B, because more than 50% of the cost is borne for qualifying child. Right? Option B, very simple. A taxpayer spouse dies in 2024. Which filing status can be surviving spouse uses for 2025 and 2026? Very simple, qualifying surviving spouse. Without even get the options. Right? Next question. If a child lives equally with both divorced parents, who is considered a custodial parent for taxpayer? Option A with lower AGI, option B higher AGI, option C the parent who claims the child first on their return, option D the parent who provides less than 50% support. We discuss its higher AGI. Okay. Which of the following does not qualify as a dependent under the qualifying relative rule? Sibling who earns 4,500 and receives more than 50% support. A parent who lives in a nursing home and receives over 50% support. A cousin who lives with the taxpayer for half of the year and receives full support from the taxpayer. A niece who lives with more than 50% support from the taxpayer and meet all tests. Who? The cousin who lives with taxpayer for half of the year, because the cousin should live for full year to be a qualifying relative. Okay, I hope you are clear. The next bit is under a multiple support agreement, a taxpayer can claim a dependent if A, they provided more than 10% of support, but other contributors agree in writing. Okay, they provide more than 50% of dependent support. Option C, they provide any support as long as the dependents live with them. Option D, they are the custodian. Very simple, it's option A. They provided more than 10% of the support, but other contributors agree in writing. A. The last bit. So the following tests apply to both qualifying child and qualifying relative for dependency. Age test can be residency, can see relationship test, D, test, and C. Okay, very simple. With this, we are done. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this session. If you have any queries, that's okay. If you feel something, okay, this is I cannot accept it now at this moment. It's very heavy. That's okay. You can take some time, read it twice. You'll definitely understand. Any queries, please reach out us. If we have live, join the live, discuss with us. We'll be with you. Okay. Until you clear your exam, you're properly settled, we'll be with you. Okay, don't worry. Any queries, you can reach out to. Okay. So, okay, then we'll wrap up today's session. Bye. Have a good day.